What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Dana White shoots down question regarding safer UFC gloves. The topic of the UFC adopting a new Trevor Whitman-like glove design once again became a trending topic this week in the wake of the disappointing end to the Justin Tafa vs. Austin Lane fight at Saturday's UFC Fight Night Jacksonville card. The bout marked the most recent example of a horrific eye poke that put an end to what was expected to be a banger of a fight in the heavyweight division. When less than a minute into the fight, Lane poked Tafa in the eye, forcing the ringside physician to stop the fight after Tafa admitted that he was unable to see. Backstage, he shared a gruesome photo of his eye while calling for the UFC to pay him his win money, given that he didn't have the opportunity to continue the fight. Meanwhile, several members of the MMA community, like Eric Nixick and Bilal Muhammad, called for Tafa to be taken to the hospital for an examination. Although a fight being stopped due to an eye poke is rare, the situation has arisen on multiple occasions. Each time it does, calls for the UFC to adopt a new glove design have been renewed, and the no contest between Tafa and Lane was no exception. After the fight, UFC President Dana White was asked on Instagram about the possibility of the promotion changing their glove design under a post where he was promoting a company called 4Ocean, which is removing plastic from oceans and beaches. Given that the question was off topic, White was less than enthusiastic, responding and telling the fan that the situation had nothing to do with the gloves and that he should mind his business. Currently, White's focus seems to be on finalizing a fight between billionaires Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, rather than going through the process of adopting a new design for the UFC gloves. So far, there's been no updates as to whether or not any permanent damage was done to Tafa's eye. While fighters in the past like Bilal Muhammad have gotten lucky and avoided permanent damage, it seems like many members of the MMA community want to put the pressure on the UFC to make changes before someone suffers a permanent injury or worse. Jon Anik reacts to rumors of Ronda Rousey's return. With Amanda Nunes now retired from MMA and the women's bantamweight title up for grabs, there have been rumors of former women's bantamweight champion Ronda Rousey making a return to action. While the talk is purely speculative at this point, many have wondered whether there was any truth to the rumors, given that many of Rousey's contemporaries like Holly Holm, Juliana Pena, and Raquel Pennington all find themselves in a position to compete for the belt. During a recent interview with MMA Fighting, Jon Anik spoke about the rumors regarding Rousey's potential return. As he explained, in a true meritocracy, a fighter should not be allowed to return from a 7-year-long hiatus and walk right into a title shot, and as a result, Rousey, being granted an immediate title shot, likely wouldn't go over well with much of the roster, despite her drawing power.
If anyone is worthy of that type of opportunity, right, it's probably Ronda Rousey, and I do believe she would be competitive because she would not enter that setting without the guarantee that she would be competitive. But I didn't like that Henry Cejudo came back and cut the line of a bunch of 35ers, that have been active. So it would be hypocritical of me to sit here and say, absolutely, let's elevate Ronda Rousey and have her return.
So far, there's been no word on how the UFC plans to handle the vacant bantamweight title. Currently, the expectation is that Juliana Pena will compete for the belt when she's healthy. However, the UFC could decide to go a couple of different routes when it comes to her opponent. Should Holly Holm emerge victorious from her July 15th main event scrap at the UFC Apex, the UFC could insert her into the bout opposite Pena. However, the other popular option among fans is Raquel Pennington, who has rattled off 5 straight wins since the summer of 2020. Do you think we'll ever see Ronda Rousey return to the octagon again, or is all this talk getting out of hand? Drop your thoughts in the comment section below. Aljamain Sterling opens up on relationship with the UFC. After Aljamain Sterling's UFC 288 win over Henry Cejudo, the UFC wasted no time booking him his next fight. After his hand was raised, the UFC welcomed Sugar Sean O'Malley to the octagon for a stare-down with the champion, before UFC President Dana White then announced a targeted bout between Sterling and O'Malley in Boston. The situation didn't sit right with the champion, who voiced his frustration given that the UFC brass had not consulted with him about his health before looking ahead to his next fight. A public back and forth with UFC President Dana White resulted in Sterling accepting the bout with O'Malley, and White gifting him a Lamborghini, signaling that the beef was all water under the bridge. During a recent appearance on Jake Paul's BS podcast, Sterling took aim at O'Malley, questioning the abilities of his past opponents and the hype the UFC has built around him.
Things like that bother me, and it's not because of him, it's because I almost feel like maybe the UFC is almost like my papi, so I look at them like my dad, where I almost feel like I need to prove something to Pops, to be like, oh yeah, you think this? I'm gonna show you, mother. For me, this is what gets me going. This is what gets me up in the morning. This is what gets me in the gym and push those hours. There's times, man, I do these Shark Tank drills.
With the two men set to square off at UFC 292 on August 19th, how do you see things playing out? Drop your thoughts in the comment section below. Before we continue, make sure you give that like button some love and be sure to subscribe to the MMA Zone for all of the latest news. Ultimate Fighter 31 finale targeted for UFC 292. When a season of The Ultimate Fighter draws to a close, the UFC usually books a fight night event headlined by the season's finalists. In addition, the card allows other contestants on the show to fight one another in the hopes of putting on an impressive performance and securing a contract with the UFC. According to the latest report from Nolan King, the final episode of The Ultimate Fighter Season 31 is set to air on August 15th. As a result, the UFC is planning to have the lightweight and bantamweight finalists compete on the UFC 292 pay-per-view card just 4 days later in Boston. With the bouts already announced for the card, 2 Ultimate Fighter finale bouts would bring the grand total of fights scheduled for the event to 13, barring any further announcements. While the news has many fight fans enthusiastic, others have also questioned what the news means for fighters who were pulled from the season at the last minute to accommodate McGregor bringing some of his teammates and training partners. At the time, White said that he would make it up to those who missed out, with many assuming those cut would compete on the TUF 31 finale show. So far, the expectation seems to be that fighters cut will have the chance to earn their way to the UFC through Dana White's Contender Series, with one of the fighters, Mitch Ramirez, already booked for an August 29th Contender Series bout. Stay tuned for updates as they become available. Dana White goes off on fan. UFC President Dana White has defended his pursuit of booking a bout between Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk just weeks after making headlines for claiming that he doesn't book gimmick fights. When a combat sports fan on Instagram questioned why White was looking to book a fight between Zuckerberg and Musk, given his claims of putting on fights between the best in the world, the UFC president went off, writing, "This isn't a gimmick fight. Gimmick is MMA guys going into boxing and getting beat. We've seen it already and know how it ends. This is a fight between two of the most powerful, richest guys in the world. Who will win? Who has seen this before? Nobody. It's also a crossover fight that literally everyone will watch." His response did little to curb the onslaught of criticism, as many question whether or not the UFC president understood the meaning of the word gimmick. Despite the fact that many, including Jack Jenkins, who picked up a big UFC Jacksonville win this past weekend, have criticized the potential bout, White seems unfazed. Do you think the fight will end up coming to fruition? Sound off in the comments section below. Khamzat Chimaev's next UFC fight revealed? There's been quite a bit of uncertainty regarding Khamzat Chimaev as of late. While Dana White has stated that Chimaev is dealing with some personal things right now that are keeping him away from the octagon, the undefeated two-division contender has continued to maintain that he wants to fight as soon as possible. Although the second half of the year is upon us, Chimaev still has sights setting on competing twice before the ball drops and 2024 is upon us. And after picking up a big win at UFC Fight Night Jacksonville, Brendan Allen spoke to Megan O'Leary backstage, where he opened up on his electrifying post-fight octagon interview with Daniel Cormier. As he explained to O'Leary, he broke the 2 rules his manager Ali Abdelaziz told him not to, one of which was calling out Jared Cannonier, who recently picked up a massive win over Marvin Vettori. According to Allen, Abdelaziz told him not to call out Cannonier because it seems as though the Killer Gorilla's next fight is already lined up. When Allen was asked by media members later at the post-fight press conference whether or not Cannonier's next fight would be against Khamzat Chimaev, he smiled, laughed, and stated that he pleaded the fifth, a term in the United States used when an individual wants to get out of answering a question without incriminating themselves. While there's been no fight announcement from the UFC, a potential fight between Cannonier and Chimaev has the MMA community split. Should the bout wind up getting finalized, who do you think would emerge victorious? Drop your predictions in the comments section down below. And now for our breaking news story of the day, we have Dana White revealing sad news. More UFC gyms in Australia are going bankrupt due to a $5 million dispute that was just settled in court after ongoing for 4 years. The court found the company and its directors had engaged in misleading and deceptive conduct during the process of selling the franchises. What do you think of this situation? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching the video. Make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell to stay up to date with MMA news every day. Here are the top comments from yesterday's video. I don't think Conor wants that Perry smoke. He'll be destroyed. Topuria would physically, mentally, and spiritually break Paddy. Please let this happen, UFC. Dana White, we don't do gimmick fights. No one is excited to see Michael Chandler fight Conor. And those were the top comments from yesterday's video. If you want to be featured on our next video, make sure to leave a comment and don't forget to check out yesterday's video in case you missed it.